Hi, it's Ian here with the second in my series of videos on how to make reeds for shawms. This is a shawm, a Renaissance shawm, a soprano, and this is an alto shawm, and the reeds we're going to make will fit on both. I've tried them with sopranos in C and D at various pitches, the altos in F and G. I've tried them at 466, 440. The reeds we're going to make work on both, and this is the sort of thing we're talking about. Now, this is the second video, and in the first one I showed you what you needed in detail, how to get it and stuff like that. I'm not going to go through that again. Please watch the first one if you need that information. I'm going to list the objects that you need to start with again so that you've got them all with you before you get going. But I'm going to do that very quickly, so watch the other video for the details. I'm also going to say two other things before we get going. First of all, this is just the way that I do it. There are many, many ways of making reeds, and I'm the first to admit this is only one of them. Please feel free to get advice from other people, to look around and see how other people do it, to do it your own way. And I'm not just talking about big things like the choice of material, the size and shape of the reed and dimensions and things. I'm talking about little things, where to put your hands, how to hold things and stuff like that. This is just the way I do it, the experience that I've made. Feel free to do it your own way, but if you want to watch on, then please do. The second thing that I want to say before we get going is that I'm going to give you measurements. Some will be critical. Some of them you need to measure as accurately as you possibly can, and some aren't. I'm going to try and make the distinction between those two things, which are critical and which aren't, so that you know when you have to be accurate and when it's not so important. So let's get going. What are the things you need? I'm going to list them very quickly now, starting with the things you probably have in your house anyway, on your home, in your room, and going through to the things you probably need to get from a hobby shop, or an electrical shop, or a do-it-yourself shop, and ending up with the things you are almost sure to need to get from a specialist shop for making reeds for wind instruments, or order them online like I do. Okay, let's get going. What do you need? You need a pair of scissors, a pencil, a ruler. You'll probably start with a plastic one like this. You might have one already, but as you get further on with this thing, you are going to need to upgrade to a metal one. It gives you more accuracy. Glass of water, that's easy. Put it back here. A pair of electrician's pliers. That's the single most important thing you need for reed making. You need a knife. This is a cheap cutting knife from a do-it-yourself shop. You can start with one of these, and as you get more into it, you probably want to upgrade to a proper reed making knife. A piece of sandpaper. You might not even need that, but if in case you do, it's handy to have it with you. And then the specialized things, what are they? You need wire for bassoon reeds. This is brass wire, annealed, and it's 0.6 millimeter diameter. You need some of this wire. You also need some binding thread, also for bassoon reeds or for shoemaking, some sort of binding thread. You need, this is getting specialized now, you need a mandrel for a bassoon reed. You need a chopping block. If you want to save your table, you can chop on your table if you want, but a block is more easy to handle. And last but not least, you need the reed cane. This is modern bassoon gouged and profiled cane, and the distance between those two shoulders here, the profiled bit, it's 6 centimeters or 60 millimeters. So you've got all those things on your table. Brush them to the side for the moment, and what you need to start with is just the cane and the knife. Now I'm going to start by standing up. My voice will get a bit further away from the microphone, so I hope you can still understand me when I'm doing this. I'm going to start by splitting the cane down its length, about 1.5 millimeters in from the corner. I find the bottom rib here, and I hold my cane against that, one end against the rib, and in the other, at the other end, I dig my knife into the end about 1.5 millimeters from the side. Now again, this is not one of those critical measurements, but don't go further in than 2 millimeters. That's not going to be wide enough in the end, and much less than 1 millimeter, it's hardly worth doing it at all. So 1.5 millimeters is about right. Don't measure it though, just use your eyesight to gauge that. I dig the knife in, pushing against this rib to start with. I'm digging the knife in and following the split up the reed. Now, reed cane splits very easily. Sometimes you don't want it to split, and sometimes you do. So I'm splitting that reed, and when I get further in, I can press against my thumb. That gives me a little bit more accuracy. Splitting the reed until I get to the other end, where the bark starts again, and then I've taken off a piece of cane about 1.5 millimeters wide. Turn the reed over and do the same on the other side. I push the cane against my rib. I use the knife to dig in about 1.5 millimeters from the side. Dig in, pushing against that rib. Not too much. Oops. That's a bit, okay. The reed splits very easily. Once I get to the profiled part, the knife will tend to go outwards. If I don't do anything about it, the knife will tend to go outwards and the part I'm taking off will get thinner and thinner. So when I get to the profiled bit, I'm angling the knife a little bit towards the center. And I can use my thumb when it gets to around here. I'm angling the knife towards the center so that that bit that's coming off is about the same thickness all the way down. Now if it isn't, if it splits up and you end up with 2 or 3 bits, it's not critical. The most important thing is that the cane at the end of it is a little bit narrower than when it started, because the bassoon reeds are wider than the shawm reeds. Once I've got this cane prepared like that, I take my ruler and I take my sharp pencil. This step between the profiled part and the bark is called the shoulder. And I start off by measuring from the shoulder. So I put my ruler on the shoulder there, and I measure 5 millimeters on the profiled part of the cane. I've just put a little mark there, and then again measuring from that shoulder, I measure 7 millimeters on the bark. Now the bark is darker and it's less easy to write on it with a pencil. You need to make a thicker mark there. I'm going to continue this mark here I've made on the profiled part for about 1 centimeter. So I'm drawing a line about 1 centimeter long in the middle of the bark, between those 2 sides. And on the bark, I'm going to do the same thing, about 1 centimeter long between the 2 sides. I'm doing this freehand. I'm not using the ruler. I've made the experience using the ruler is more tricky than actually doing it freehand. I turn the reed round and I put my ruler again on that shoulder between the bark and the profile part of the reed. Now, a lot of people try to use the end of the ruler for making these measurements. I find the end is not, the ruler is not so easy to hold as if I turn it over and I find a centimeter mark somewhere in the middle. Now I'm on 16 centimeters, it doesn't have to be that, it could be anything. Then I get a good grip on the ruler with one hand, and the first mark I'm going to make is somewhere in the middle between the 2 edges of the reed, the 2 sides of the reed. It doesn't have to be, it's not critical, it doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, but somewhere there. And this time on the second side, I'm only marking 5 millimeters onto the profiled part of the bark, make a little mark there somewhere in the middle, and then I continue this little line about 1 centimeter long, to make it about 1 centimeter long, somewhere in the middle between the two sides of the reed. It's not critical, as I've said before. The next mark I'm going to make is right in the middle of the reed. And if you've got good light and good eyesight, and depending on how it's profiled, you can actually see the line here down the middle where you will end up folding it, and then you can just mark it. But it's always worth checking. This profiled part should be 60 millimeters long, so 6 centimeters long, and so I mark here 3 centimeters from each end. I can actually see the mark, the line where it's been profiled. But it's worth checking, as I say. The same on the other side. I'm just making a little tiny mark in the middle of the profile, right at the edge of the cane. I turn the reed round so that it's facing me again, and I find my line, which I've drawn on it here, 5 millimeters from the shoulder towards the middle. And what I want to do is to find the middle between the two sides of the cane. How do I do that? Well, I put my ruler in there. I find a centimeter mark somewhere in the middle, and I'm looking to see how many millimeters there overhang the two ends, how many millimeters are sticking out before I get to the next centimeter mark. Now the reed will be about 16 millimeters wide. Not critical, again, it's not critical, but so I've got about 2 millimeters hanging over the edge on either side, and there's the middle. So I mark the middle, and then I mark 4 millimeters to the right and 4 millimeters to the left. So I've got 3 marks on my line. This is why I made this line about 1 centimeter long, right in the middle between the two sides, and then 4 millimeters between that mark and this one on the right, and 4 millimeters to the left. I've got 3 marks on that line. My second line here, which was 7 millimeters from the bark, from the ridge of the bark towards the end, I don't need to mark that. But I do turn it over, and the corresponding line on the other side, I do the same thing. I find the middle. And again, I'm not using the edge or the end of the ruler to do this. This really doesn't work. I'm using the middle, somewhere in the middle of the ruler. And what I'm doing is I'm pressing down with my ring finger and my little finger on one side and my index finger on the other side. So I'm kind of clamping the reed underneath the ruler. Not pressing too hard because that's going to split the reed. I don't want to do that right now. But I'm just clamping it there so that when I'm marking it, it doesn't move around. And I'm just using these fingers to do that. And I'm finding a centimeter marking somewhere in the middle of the ruler. And I'm seeing how many millimeters overhang to the next centimeter mark there and to the next centimeter mark there. It's about 2, a little bit more than 2. And when it's the same on both sides, I can mark that middle point. And then I take 4 millimeters to the right, make a mark there, 4 millimeters to the left, and make a mark there. So I've got 3 markings on this line as well. And I've got these 2 in the middle and those 3 markings there. The next line I want to draw is between this corner here and this corner here. So I can put my ruler on the reed, and I can join up those 2 places. Oops, now that's easier said than done. Actually, I tend to use my free hand to do this. I sort of check, here and here. Yeah, I can just join that up here. And then I do the other side as well. I join up this corner here with this corner here. My dad told me how to mark straight lines by, it's not a very straight one. It's not, again, it's not absolutely critical, because the critical thing is where you actually cut it. Just join up those 2 corners there. So you've got 2 trapeziums, symmetrical on each side of the reed. I don't actually, nowadays I don't make this marking. When you get good at it, you can just do it with the knife itself when you're cutting it. But to begin with, it's worth making those markings there. So you've got this trapezium here where you will cut the reed when it's ready. Good luck with making your markings. Use a sharp pencil, use a metal ruler if you can get one. These aren't very expensive. It's worth getting one so that you're more accurate in your measurements. And in the next video, we will carry on and see what happens then. Thanks for watching. Do like it if you like it. Give me a thumbs up, write me a comment, whatever. Bye-bye.